in what we're going to be, some of the things we're going to be discussing today. And obviously, dealing with Main Street right now, I'm sure, is an extreme challenge. I know some of us deal with Main Street and industrial. Some of us deal primarily with Main Street, and some of us deal with just industrial. So I think this is a good cross-section of panelists. Next up, we have Daniel Jackson. Daniel is the president and CEO of Carroll Tomorrow and the Carroll County Chamber of Commerce. It's a public-private partnership focusing on economic and community development. He's worked with Carroll Tomorrow for over 18 years, and he served as the chamber president for over 13 years. He has a very interesting understanding of Main Street, as he was in the men's retail clothing industry as a vice president partner in the popular men's store, the Squire Shop. Next, we have somebody that probably needs no introduction whatsoever. I hear her on podcast all the time, so it's glad to be in the same Brady Bunch squares, if you will, with Mary Ann Moon. She's the executive director of Prosper Economic Development Corporation out of Prosper, Texas. Prior to that position, she was the vice president of economic development and marketing for Tice Engineering Incorporated. And so she has been very active in the economic development field. I would say she's well qualified, and I think most of you all would agree with me as well. Will Payne is the managing partner of Coalfield Strategies, LLC, a one-stop economic development shop driving new business investment to Southwest Virginia. He previously served in the Northam administration, focusing on the developing U.S. East Coast offshore wind industry, supply chain, and economic sustainability strategies in Virginia's coal fields. For over a decade prior, he was principal of Bull Moose Strategies, LLC, a political consulting firm specializing in strategic communications and building bipartisan coalitions. Will co-founded the Appalachian Grains LLC as the first craft beverage industry grain broker connecting growers and breweries. He graduated from William and Mary, and Will obviously is very experienced too. And finally, Vanessa Wagner. She is the Director of Business Development for the Golden Isles Development Authority. In this role, she is tasked with creating and implementing a marketing and sales strategy to attract and retain business, investment, and workforce to the Golden Isles. She joined the organization about a year ago with more than 12 years of marketing and program development experience with economic development, startup, and international organizations. So welcome to all of our panelists. And so we're going to begin with our first question. And this one is set up for everyone. So share one or two of the challenges facing you implementing a program that you've recently done. So how did you overcome these challenges?
Will, do you want us to go in order, or how do you want to do that?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, let's just, Ken, since I see you first, go right ahead.
Sure. One of the biggest challenges we had, I think, are just like any other small town, coming up with the resources to be able to put the program in place financially. And we'll talk about my program, I guess, when it's my turn, but to be able to reach out to the small businesses that we deal with, not just Main Street, but retail and service throughout the town of 5,500 here in Marion, in our industry as well. And that's been a challenge for us. And the first thing we did, we've always done here in the office, determine the problem and then define the solution. And we've kind of got that honed down after 25 years of doing this. So the first thing, as we saw this kind of collapsing around us, was to reach out and ask the folks specifically what they needed. We found out what those needs were, and we were creative in finding ways to solve that. So the biggest challenge first was to find out exactly what we needed in these turbulent times when nobody knew exactly what they needed to begin with.
And before I hand it over to Daniel, there is a question and answer. So if at any time you have a question, just type it in the box, and we will get to it as quick as we can. So now I'll turn it over to Daniel.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I think we're all in a similar boat that initially it was the uncertainty of what was going on with the virus. Changes were occurring daily. We were getting mixed messages from local to the federal level. fire hose of information, which turned in just an endless string of conference calls and Zoominars and all the other things we've experienced. Staff being spread to home and all over, and leadership likewise. We typically in this business, you pull your people in together and sit down and resolve issues, and that was not the case. Unfamiliar routine, we were just as busy, but we totally discarded our calendar and had to rebuild a new one, and just the uncertainty, but it seemed like we were just as busy. And then we discovered some technology gaps that we're all experiencing as we do all these conference calls and webinars. So early on, those were some of the challenges that we faced along with everybody else, I think.
Okay, Will, you're next.
You know, our organization is not affiliated with, you know, a particular government. And so we had to do is figure out what is our role. We focus, you know, primarily on lead generation and some, you know, marketing. And so, you know, I'll talk about this, I guess, in my portion, but, you know, we saw a great opportunity to, you know, support efforts using, you know, private sector driven efforts to offer, you know, forgivable loans to small businesses. And, you know, of course, one of the challenges there is starting those efforts up and raising enough dollars to make a difference. And I'll get into both a statewide program and then more a regional program that's been, you know, started in Southwest Virginia.
Okay, Vanessa.
Hello, everyone. So I feel one of the biggest challenges we faced early on was an abundance of good intentions. Everyone wanted to help businesses and everyone wanted to do the right thing. And one of the challenges we started to see was that a lot of our partner organizations, whether that be the Chamber, the Tourism Board, our downtown development, we were all sending out the same message, but we were all wording it a little differently. It all looked a little different. And right now it's confusing enough for small business owners to make sense of everything happening, let alone having all of, you know, 5 groups in the community sending out things a little different. So what we decided early on was that we needed to collaborate and have a consistent message. So we worked together and our solution became coastal-strong.com, where we worked on creating one platform that would have the same voice. It is stripped of all branding, which is, as a marketer, it was a little uncomfortable for me. But the goal of it was, what could we do to make sure that information was being delivered clear, concise to our businesses? And what is the most important message we need to deliver? Sometimes it changes day to day, but, you know, this week. And so that Coastal Strong site, we update it every single day. The first mission, and what we're still finding is incredibly valuable, is providing a clear path on applying for any of the federal relief programs, including answers to the most common questions that we're hearing from our SBDC, our chamber. And, you know, I think as a result, I'm seeing that people are spending up to 8 minutes on that FAQ page. So they're clearly getting the information they need. They're finding value in that. And as a community, we're sending out a unified message and being clear to our business owners.
Thank you, Vanessa. And I think I don't know how well your audio is picking up. So you may either need to speak louder or.
Into my mic.
Okay. Okay, Marianne, you're next.
Vanessa, there was a lot of difficulty disseminating information, making certain that we were all given the information that was necessary to share with our businesses and understanding what the programs were. There was a lot of information that was scattered. There was a lack of consistency among different organizations that were producing information. So our biggest challenge was making certain that we could get everybody on the same page. Everybody was sharing the same facts. Everyone was disseminating the same and very accurate information to people. Another challenge that we faced here was that very few people had ever been faced with any kind of disaster, whether it be man-made, a natural disaster. And while this is very different, some of the basic elements of it and addressing it are the same. And there was a lack of that experience. And those of us that had been in those situations had to spend time gathering that information and sharing it with others on how we needed to work as one unit to address those problems.
So Marianne, we're going to stay with you for this next question.
Okay.
And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have, questions and answers. Thanks for the input on the volume. We're working on that. And I will prompt you, but there will be a poll that will pop up from time to time before certain questions. But right now, we're economic developers, Marianne, usually don't have to prove their value. But it's kind of easy now for us to do, but what have you been doing specifically in your region to demonstrate your value?
Well, frankly, we aren't just doing it now, we're always doing it. I think that goes for everyone in the profession. And the greatest value that we have presently is being that conduit to our businesses for information that's real time, that's accurate, and that it's consistently updated, and helping our businesses understand where they need to go to get that information, how they need to access programs, providing support and assistance for them to do that, whether it be sitting with them in a safe place, wearing a mask, to apply for programs online, putting them in contact with banks and lending institutions that can assist them, making certain that we're listening to the businesses. It's almost like a BR&E program on steroids. We are in constant contact with those businesses and listening to what their problems are, and not just doing it to gather data, but using that data and using that information to create assistance, to create programs of support. And that, more than anything, illustrates our value as an organization.
Yes, and so we have a question, and we're going to go back to Vanessa real quick. Vanessa, the website that you were referring to, was that Coastal Strong?
Coastal-strong.com. When you do things quickly, you don't always get the URL you would hope for.
Okay, Coastal-strong. Thank you. And so, Daniel, the spotlight's on you. What kind of glaringly troublesome obstacles are you facing when you're helping your businesses in your area navigate this crisis?
It's a great question. The hard part is the economy was strong and all of our folks were rocking and rolling. Employment was great and everybody was doing good business. When this hit, it has not had an equal effect. We've had many who have closed. We have some who want to reopen. They're trying to figure out how to do that. There's liability issues. There's the challenge of getting cleaning supplies. There's trying to get the employees to come back. Restaurants and others who are saying, if I operate at 25% or 50%, can I even justify being open? We talked to an attorney yesterday. He has not a single person scheduled for the next 2 weeks, and court shut down. So the challenge now is it's all across the board. Some actually, we have a retail custom golf cart guy who set a new record in sales because everybody was stir crazy. So they went and bought him a golf cart and playing at home. So that's the problem. Our people are scattered in terms of what they do in different sectors, have been affected in different ways. And the challenge for us is to reach out to them and find them and try to meet their needs. But it's very varied, and that makes it difficult, I think, for us.
Okay, and have you been able to follow up, answer 100% of those types of issues you've dealt with? Have you got an answer that is a workable answer? It wasn't just a pat on the back and said, bless your heart, was it?
In terms of our response to them?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll get to that later, I guess, as well. But yes, we've been forced, all of us have been forced to use every communication tool and resource in our toolbox and invent some additional ones. So surveys and videos and media and radio talk shows and any and every possible way that we can to try to reach out to them. The other thing is we've divided our entire, since we are a chamber, we do have a membership, we divided everybody into sectors. We're dividing staff, executive committee, and our board into responding to, and so we're trying to narrow down what the challenges and opportunity is per sector, and we think we'll be more efficient and more effective to meet their needs by doing it that way. But clearly a big challenge for all of us.
So in our lead-up conversations to this meeting, each of you had some best practices that you had done and had found very helpful. And we'll start again with Ken. If you'll just share those best practices, just a couple of minutes, the highlights of it, the things you've done over the past 6 weeks.
Absolutely. We started out with, like everybody else did, almost 2 months ago, and we saw it hitting pretty heavy. So the first thing we did, again, listen to our merchants and saw what they needed. So we produced some signage with our branding on there that we gave out. And it was really not only just for our businesses, but we found out like the curbside for our restaurants, other community asked for that. So we provided a template. They pulled off Marion, put their community on there, and they used those. Other communities around us have actually used our signs, even neighboring communities that talk about this is curbside pickup. We did some signs that said, sorry, we're closed for now, but we expect to be open soon, and kept up the morale on that. The biggest thing we did that helped out was we developed our own small business loan pool. We had some money that we had put back from USDA Rural Development. Craig Barbaro in the Withville office had helped us out with. So we had a loan pool of about $150,000 that over time we have lent out in $15,000 increments that's been paid back, so that money stayed in that revolving loan pool. So we had about $34,000 in that pool. Our downtown association had $16,000 in a grant pool. So we put together and had a $50,000 loan pool that we're loaning out at 0% interest for 120 days. After 120 days, it goes for a year at 2% interest. And we put it out there, just a real quick one-page application. We can get it approved and turn around in about 24 hours. And so far, we've had 8 of our local businesses. Now, Marion's a community of 5,500 people. So we turned around 8 businesses in the past month. And out of that, we have saved somewhere around 24 jobs in those 8 businesses that have been able to keep their doors open through this by having the flexibility, the mobility, and the foresight to have that money and the blessing to have that money here to be able to turn around and immediately put back in people's hands to pay their rent, to be able to keep the lights on, keep the businesses open.
So Will, I'm going to drop down to you this time, go a little out of order. What are some of the best practices you've done in your group?
Sure. Let me touch on just a couple private sector driven forgivable loan programs in Virginia, kind of building off of what Ken just said, one regional, one statewide, intended for small businesses that need a cash infusion during this pandemic. Both of these funds in the U.S. Chambers Save Small Business Fund, which I think everyone knows was so popular that it only lasted a few days and all the funds were spent. But yeah, I think these 2 funds I'm going to talk about and then the U.S. Chamber one, were created somewhat in response to the frustration that small business owners were experiencing with their own banks. And we've talked to a number of individuals who've been either turned down by their bank or frustrated with the additional hoops that they have to jump through in order to get their PPP application ready to go. And so there are 2 funds here. First is the Virginia 30-Day Fund. It's a statewide forgivable loan fund for small businesses, started by a good friend, entrepreneur in Northern Virginia. And we have a lot of partnerships in Northern Virginia, some of the work that we're doing, looking at technology and data centers. These folks were great to reach out to us to get us on board as part of the team, helping raise money on the advisory board. And so this is an average amount of $3,000 for small businesses with 3 to 30 employees. Quick and easy, red tape-free online application, and really looking at these micro businesses, a lot of restaurants that where $3,000 makes a difference and staying open for another couple of weeks. And as a result of the popularity of this thing, it's now we have some sub funds that are being created, focusing on specific communities in Northern Virginia and the Peninsula, Williamsburg area, which allows the community and businesses to step up and donate their money to an existing 501c3 without having to reinvent the wheel. And so even people have sent in their stimulus checks. So that's, it's been popular. We've gotten our legislators, and legislators are part of my 9, I guess I have 9 bosses, and they represent half of those. And those folks have all given and are actively, encouraging businesses, around the region to apply. The other is a more homegrown fund called the Region Ahead Local Business Recovery Fund. This represents Southwest Virginia and the Northeast Tennessee. Funding coming from businesses and business leaders. All the Southwest Virginia Chambers of Commerce are key partners in this, and we have a number of our communities on this call. The fund is targeting small businesses with fewer than 50 employees, and the awards are pretty variable. But in both cases, it's addressing a real need to help a business sustain itself for if it's a couple extra weeks. And we've seen a real pay it forward kind of culture that's been created out of this, and some businesses have used that to recover and have donated some of the money back to the 30-day fund, for example, for someone else to benefit from. So it's very exciting to see the community step up, businesses step up to help one another.
That's great, Will. Sounds like a very interesting program. Vanessa, what about you?
So similar to a lot of other organizations, funding is a big challenge right now for our small business community. We were fortunate that our board supported a program called our Share the Future initiative earlier in the fiscal year. And this was a program where we were awarding small dollar amounts to businesses to help them either get new equipment or a technology that would help them add revenue or grow a new product line. So we had planned on using our last of the Share the Future during National Small Business Week. That's postponed. So we repurposed that existing fund to help one of our small businesses in the community. They were custom window treatments here on St. Simon's Island, and we approached them and were able to help them start producing masks. Now, there's more than just the producing of the masks. We needed this to help our manufacturers, or our larger employers that were concerned about the safety of their employees. So with this grant, we were able to help that small business start producing masks, but it also took the cost down for our larger manufacturers to be able to purchase this at a cost that was reasonable. So the larger manufacturers were willing to pay maybe a little bit more than they would have with a larger organization, but they were keeping those dollars local. So we were looking at what we already had available to us and just tweaking it and modifying it to have a great impact on not just maybe 1 or 2 businesses, but being able to benefit multiple. And to this day, I'm still seeing that the organization's taking now smaller orders for companies making the masks. It's a mom and pop shop. You see them working day in, day out. You're seeing our manufacturers wearing these into their establishments. So that was just a creative way that our team and our board looked at how we could use something that already was working and tweak it to meet the current needs of the crisis.
Okay, Mary Ann, how about you? What in your part of the world?
Very much focused on the retail sector and our entertainment. And we have a large amount of restaurants. So we found ourselves kind of doing something a little bit different compared to what I've done in the past. And that was focusing on our restaurant sector, creating a website that was updated and is updated every Friday that shows who's open for curbside service, who's offering delivery, how well are they doing, what their percentage of sales are they being able to support a lot of the employees that are there, and really blasting out that information through all the avenues that we had on our website, on social media, on our town's website. And then the other thing that was really interesting for us, and it's something that we're still in the process of fine-tuning, but the response has been pretty overwhelming, and that is in Texas, as you guys know, a lot of our businesses were open to a 25% capacity. And that also affected some of our service industry folks and the changes that they were having to make to adapt to supporting their clients and their customers. So we did a service to go type of website, or retail to go. And we've been surveying all of those providers. And what they do is they access a link that we have, and we ask them specifically for the name of their business, what they provide, what kind of products they provide, and what they're doing to adjust service. And surprisingly, a lot of them are offering curbside delivery for items, for retail orders, similar to what a big Walmart would do, but on a very small local scale. And we're able to take that information, blast it out publicly, and support that retail to go segment of our community. And that's been really interesting for us to see that whole changing dynamic of retail providers.
Very, very good. And Daniel, last but certainly not least on this topic, I know you've had a lot of interesting things to
We
deal
have,
with.
you know, early on, all of us, I think we've gone through these transitional times, and early on we did a tip jar because the restaurants obviously were a big focus and the servers being displaced. So using our web and a new Facebook, we created a tip jar where people could go on and select the restaurant. And then we had a buy now, shop later campaign because we thought stores would be closed for a couple of weeks, and then that extended. So it became a buy now, shop local. Here's a few other things we have done or are doing or getting ready to do. We ordered some masks with our logo, and our shop local campaign we branded as Think Carol First 3 or 4 years ago. So it'll have our actual logo and then the Think Carol First. They're due in Friday. We're going to take them to our 3 Main Street cities, and then we'll keep some to dole out just as a reminder of best practices, plus a chance to sort of promote that. We've done 3 sets of surveys. The first one, we were asking our businesses, what have you done to change? This was 3 or 4 weeks ago. The next one was, what information do you need? And at that time, number 1 was, how do I get the stimulus money and what do I do with employees? The most recent one was to ask, what webinars do you want? And to that point, we've done one on mental health. We're going to do one Thursday on best practices. The hospital is helping with that. We're doing one on tax implications for everyone who got the PPP money next Monday to help them understand the responsibility to go along with those grants or loans. And then next Tuesday, we're going to do one on telecommuting, since we're all having to learn that. We're doing some videos, and those are transitioning from me doing them to going out to the businesses and video and them being open so people can begin to see that. You know, chambers do ribbon cuttings, so we're copying this from somebody out there, ribbon tying with blue ribbons. And so we've ordered blue ribbons. We're going to go out and take a photo here at the chamber, and we're going to start doling out blue ribbons and tell every business that's open, put that on the door so people will know. Send us a photo of that, and we'll start promoting that. So that recovery phase now, anything we can do visually to let people know. We deputized the entire chamber board, partnered them up with our staff and executive committee, and that's our recovery task force. And then our government affairs council, we assigned them to work with our healthcare and with our local government. This, unlike weather events and other things, a lot of the policies and the rules have been driven by government and executive orders from governors or mayors or whatever. So we thought it was important to have that unified message that was shared earlier. So Government Affairs Council of the Chamber working with healthcare leadership, local government to be sure we've got a unified message. So those are some things that we're trying to do as we respond. But the primary thing is the focus now is on the recovery and getting back to business. And some of these other things were 2, 3, or 4 weeks ago.
Very good. Well, thanks for sharing that. I see everybody has taken, if you have not taken the poll, you can do that. And it looks like we've gotten the results back. And the question was, have you surveyed your business community to determine the resources, assistance that they need for reopening? And it looks like the majority of you all have, 81% have surveyed your business community on what types of assistance they need to open back up. And I know as we look across the footprint that we have on this call, we have various sundry reopening statuses. In South Carolina, you still can't get a haircut, which is not a problem for me. You still can't dine in a restaurant, but they are allowing you to have curbside, but also outside seating at proper social distancing. And each state has its own set of challenges. So that is good that you all, and I would expect nothing less of our group as a whole, to be in tune and be responsive to the community, to the business community. So now the next question is, what are some programs, projects your organization is considering to help now that reopening is occurring? Because I'm sure not every business in your community is just because they can doesn't mean that they are opening back up. What are you doing to work with them to help these businesses? Anyone want to start?
Will, I can take that first. And again, our role I mentioned before is a little different than some of the other folks in this call, but we see our focus as much more of a business development one, supporting the prospects we've either helped launch or the other prospects we're trying to get across the finish line. And so some need help in making connections with potential clients, either in the public sector or with private businesses. And so it's all about tapping into our relationships, and that's been our priority, I guess, the last 6 to 7 weeks, and we'll continue as we crawl out of this slowdown. And so to help those businesses that need to look at their client base and need to expand, and it's pretty much the easiest way for us to get engaged.
If you like, I'll jump.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
It's a workforce strategy in their toolbox right now. And based on a lot of the survey responses we're getting from our community and the stories we're hearing as we talk one-on-one with our business owners, is that there's going to be a big lift on getting folks back in jobs, but also helping employers fill in those gaps as they are in the recovery process. So at the Development Authority, we've started updating our workforce development strategy to be part of that recovery efforts. One of the ideas that's on the table right now is earlier in the year, we initiated a campaign and a program and resources called Keep Glenn Running. That program was targeting high school students, their parents, and educators to helping them understand the opportunities in manufacturing, where they could go to get those skills and training, and the types of jobs available in the community. And that was a collective effort with our educational partners and our manufacturing businesses. In COVID recovery, we're looking at how we can use that same platform and that same tool we've already invested in, but adjust it so that we can have an adult audience that can tap into that. So modifying some of the information there, some of it might have to look a little different. What an adult appeals to might not, what we had appealing to a teenager probably doesn't appeal to an adult. But also investigating the probability of putting on a hyper-localized job portal for our local employers and our local job seekers to make those connections.
Ken, I think you had something you were going to add.
Sure. We've started out in the Main Street program, and now we work throughout the rest of the town. So one thing we've done, we're working with our business owners as we get ready to emerge, and hopefully here in Virginia, that starts the process next Friday, is of course communicating with them what is going to be required or what's going to be allowed under the regulations. But then also to be able to come back once we emerge from this to the point where we can with our fairs and festivals, which are kind of a hallmark for us here. Hopefully be able to get some of those done late summer. And we think that's important to kickstart the economy when people are feeling comfortable coming out. The trick we have is not only that comfort level where people feel like they're comfortable coming out, but also in the supply chain. As we're seeing our neighboring state down in Tennessee, they've opened up already, and we're having some supply chain issues in our restaurants. The worst thing we can do, I think, is for us to have a big festival, have people downtown, and not to have any food or beverage to be able to supply to them. So there's a tightrope we're walking there, but the plan is, as we emerge from this, to have a community celebration and to kickstart our our hospitality industry and hard, and be able to get back up to where we were.
Mary Ann, so on you.
Mentioned earlier that we're doing with our businesses, it also has that workforce component in there. And we work very closely with the Texas Workforce Commission, who have been a big partner for us. We've had periodic podcasts with them, interviews with them, participated in some of the events that others have done throughout the community to get everyone in the counties and municipalities on the same page. And from all of that information, we're finding that the Workforce Commission has some programs that are available for retraining, even providing child care for people during that time of retraining, and taking a really hard look at how employment may change after this whole crisis is behind us. We've gotten a lot of response from businesses that say that their employees have been very productive working from home. And in doing that, are they going to take a look at maybe the lessening need of office space? How is that going to impact a community like ours that is focused on those professional services if people are going to stay home and work because they have been efficient? So a lot of that information that we're gathering right now is going to be useful for us when we come out of this whole crisis. But that information that we're gathering from those surveys is going to help us to develop more strategies for our organization moving forward. And so I think a couple people have mentioned about that reentry into hospitality, and for communities that are really focused on entertainment, hospitality, restaurant services, that's going to change for us too, because how's that going to look? And gathering all of those opinions and ideas from our providers and from our businesses on what they're going to need and what their expectations are things that we're really focusing on, so we can determine what our path moving forward is going to be.
All right, excellent. Well, we've got a few questions that have popped in, so we're going to deviate just slightly from the agenda. The first one, very interesting storyline here. I'm sure nobody's ever heard this before. They are a one-person band right now. They're the executive director of their local EDC, and they're serving as the only person in the office. They're technology savvy, but the rural community is not. Any suggestions that an entity like this one from you all to keep up with all the changes, implementing programs in the community and managing to update your local businesses while you're the only person able to do so? The board is not active in these type of initiatives, and the chamber is not exactly a five-star chamber.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is Mary Ann. I would like to mention that I spent a lot of time working in rural communities, and I know the other folks on this session have too and are doing so. And I know for me, in those situations, it was very critical that I reached out to others, and everything from people at the state level to USDA to regional organizations, and then fellow community leaders, whether they were economic developers or chamber people, and just took that initiative to collaborate and find ways in which you could share that information. Again, that you mentioned about the technology challenges, and it's a huge problem for a lot of our rural communities, more so than a lot of people realize, without broadband capacity and the opportunity to have internet. We even enlisted the help of our utility providers and did the old snail mail deal, made flyers of information that were included in utility bills because we knew that people would get that information at their home. Just went back to some grassroots efforts. And I think that as economic developers, especially nowadays, sometimes we forget to do that. We get so caught up with technology and the ease of it that we forget that we need to maybe take a step back and look at the basics of communication and how we can create programs or ideas or communication for those people that can't be reached through technology. So I would highly encourage that individual that asked that question to do those things.
I'll take a shot as well, Will, if you like.
Please go right ahead.
So, you know, in the game show, when they ask you a tough question, they allow you to call a friend. And in the profession that we're in, we have a lot of friends. From the chamber side, you have the U.S. Chamber, the Georgia Chamber. In Georgia, we have Metro Atlanta Chamber. We have a professional association for chamber, and then those of us in economic development, we have the same for that. Every single week, we've been on conference calls with regional chambers. We happen to be at a crossroads, so we do one from us all the way to the Tennessee line, and then we do a second one with the 9 counties south of us. And then I've been on several calls with colleagues, smaller chambers. So I think the answer is, as others have said or would say, reach out to a friend, reach out to colleagues that are in the industry. And even if you don't have an active board, there's got to be 2 or 3 or 4 champions that are friends that you can reach out to and begin to build a local support team of those volunteers who care about the community and the organization, and rely on them to help.
Very good. I agree. You feel like you're alone, but if you might have to make a lot of phone calls, but you can find a helper out there. Anybody else got anything? Because to add to that, because Daniel, there's another question for you. Somebody is wanting to know the details of your mask and the logo, and where are they being printed?
Okay, so you know, several of us have industries in our community or in the state that are doing masks. And as we talked about the recovery effort, and as Georgia began to open back up, and then the question was, do you use masks or not? We were just talking about it as staff, and I thought, you know, 2 things. One, if we can promote Shop Local, and that happens to be the logo of that message, plus the new Facebook page we created was also titled Think Carroll First. And then secondly, just to demonstrate that. Anyway, the answer is we have a local firm that does marketing logos on all kinds of different clothing and apparel. And they had shared about 3 weeks ago that they were beginning to produce masks. So we were actually literally able to go to our own community, order a very high-end 3 fabric mask that's washable and reusable. And then we just took our logo, which they already had in stock since they do shirts and other things for us, and our Think Carroll First, and had that put on there. So they're due in Friday. We're very excited about that. It's an opportunity, just a unique marketing opportunity, but hopefully it will speak a message to our citizens as they get out there for best practices during this interim phase.
All right, so the last question, and then after this question, we'll go to the next poll, but we've got somebody whose budget's been frozen, so spending money is something they don't have to deal with. Are there any free or low cost being less than $500, resources or platforms for campaign to help businesses recover and reopen that any of y'all are aware of?
If you don't mind, I'll jump in on this up front. What we use here in Marion extensively are press releases. We have a good relationship with our local and our regional paper, bi-weekly and daily. Also with our TV stations in the neighboring television markets. We're about 45 minutes out of the Tri-Cities, Tennessee, Virginia, Bristol, Kingsport, Johnson City. And we now have started doing Zoom and Skype meetings so that we are able to still have our message on TV. All that stuff is free. And then we also write op-ed pieces, and certainly social media. Social media presence has just really taken a huge part of our time, because that's the easiest way to get the message out when you have very little budget. And then the other thing, we talked earlier about some of the signage and stuff we did without putting a whole lot of money into it. I have somebody design you some really nice things like this, and they're not expensive to print up. some nice signage that you can give out that has your logo that keeps your brand going and lets people know you care about them, and that's part of the thing. The last thing we did is we started here after Governor Northam speaks Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 2 o'clock. Is I'll take notes here, and then we go Facebook Live on the town page and also on my own Facebook page. And I'll recap what the governor said. We'll highlight and showcase a local business or two. We'll talk about our loan pool and some of the activities we have going on here, and always end on an upbeat message of positivity of how we're coming out of this and how we're working together. So we give the governor's good, bad, mediocre news, but we give some good news on our businesses and a path forward. And that seems to be really well. We're getting several hundred, a couple of thousand views every time we do that. And all that stuff is free.
I want to add to that. I think a lot of times as we talk about social media and all of those types of campaigns, which are amazing and we should use them, a lot of times the power and impact of email marketing, people forget about. Still access platforms like MailChimp at no cost. There are design platforms like Canva, which I don't know anything about graphic design, but I became the in-house graphic designer, so that's what I use. So there are definitely, don't forget about email. I understand that could be a challenge in rural communities where broadband or internet access become a challenge, but certainly make sure that's part of. I know during this time to ensure that they're getting the information and resources. And just the other thing I would advise on that is you have to remember your audience on email, Facebook, Instagram, whatever platforms you're subscribing to may be a little different. So take some time to look at the analytics at who your audience is and just tweak those messages a little to fit that.
Very good. Well, I think we're going, Matthew, if you'll go ahead and put up the poll question. For the rest of the year, what do you, the participants on this meeting, anticipate spending most of your time on? Business attraction or retention? And while you're answering that, I'm going to, and as we're getting close to the end of the program, if you could turn your clock back for 6 weeks or 2 months, whatever you want to call it, what's one thing that you would have done differently? And whoever wants to go, I tell you, let's start with Will.
It's a good question. I mean, the you know, our work is really, I think actually, in fact, this pandemic has helped kind of confirm focus on, you know, on certain areas and, you know, create new opportunities in others. And so, I don't think any of us could have really guessed, you know, how long we'd be stuck in, you know, in slow motion here. But I think if, you know, we, about a couple of weeks ago, pulled together some of the region's top business leaders to brainstorm how we could pivot our activities, you know, like to focus on PPE and pursuing that aggressively. I think doing that earlier would have been better. And it's easier to say that now, but focusing earlier on how you can pivot in a crisis like this, and maybe that should be an ongoing exercise and not just something you do when you have to. That's probably the only change I'd make at this point.
Ken, go ahead.
Sure. If we had 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, had knowledge of this, we certainly would have been better prepared and had some things ready to roll out. Of course, just like on 9/11 or the Great Recession, we were able to move pretty flexible and be the tip of the spear and kind of leading not only our community, but the region in getting information out. You ask about how we're going to be dividing up our time. I see for the next year, 85% of our time is going to be in retention, 10% will be on recruitment, and my staff tells me the other 5% of the time they're going to go get haircuts they've missed out on.
Which is not a problem for you either, is it?
Exactly.
Anybody else want to add to the cause?
I would just say if we could go back 6 weeks ago, first and foremost, probably would have hugged my team. When you don't see people, you start to realize how much you miss them and appreciated them. But also during a time like this is where sometimes when things hit the fan, you start to see maybe some gaps or things that weren't addressed previously. Personally, when we had those first work from home challenges, I think understanding that we might not have had the appropriate communication protocols in place, or as individuals weren't clearly articulating what our intentions were or our expectations. So I think when you don't plan for a crisis, but making sure you have those proper policies in place ahead of time. Well, hopefully we never see something like this again. We're all subject to something that could happen that changes how our day-to-day operation goes. So I would just look at the policies in place in your organization and how you interact with not only your team, but partners as well.
Shall I answer?
Go right ahead.
Well, if I could turn the clock back 6 weeks ago, I'd put myself on 6-week furlough and come back this week. It's finally starting to look better after a miserable, painful 6 weeks. The doors were closed, but we were here every single day. And for all of us, it has not been a pleasant experience, but to the credit of this industry and listening from our fellow panelists and others, kudos for an industry that really stepped up, took it personal and responsible, and reached out and did our very dead level best to respond to the needs of our people. And that's what we'll continue to do.
Mary Ann, anything to add?
Yeah, we spoke about this, and I kind of like Daniel, I think 6 weeks ago I would have found some really cool place to go and say, oh, I can't come home. We've been here every day, a lot of times working overtime, and we were very fortunate because our building is, it's a safe place, so to speak, and our staff has been adhering to very strict protocols to make certain that we could be here. But when we spoke about this, about what would we do differently, one of the things we really would have focused on was reaching out to our businesses to find out from them if they had any sort of resiliency plan in place. What kind of savings they had they been preparing for a rainy day? And I know moving forward, we're going to have some emphasis placed on that. And I realize that it's tough sometimes for companies and businesses to put aside money for those rainy days or those unexpected challenges, but there's other things that they can do. Providing information to employees if should something happen within the business that maybe reduces their client base or incomes, what they would do to prepare for less workforce in their place, what they would do to address maybe losing a key customer. Those are the kind of things that are really just good business practices, and we really plan to engage with our businesses and offer some direction and support and education for them on creating that resiliency package for their businesses.
And Mary Ann, that's a very good statement. Each one of you actually had great outlooks. I know the past 6 weeks for me, well, especially the first 4 weeks, it kind of felt like I was in the Bill Murray movie Groundhog Day. It was same song, different verse every day. I mean, I didn't mind it, but now looking back, I'm like, wow. And I think all of us have done an outstanding job. So, and I think that ties into what the group from the survey has said their focus for the balance of 2020 is going to be in business retention. 76% of you all said business retention was going to be your focus. We all know that should be our focus anyway, but I bet that a lot of our elected officials, they like the bright lights of a new announcement, but I think all of us know that existing industry can go somewhere else and start up just as easily. So, but I think Mary Ann, you tied it up very well, and we're right up against 4 o'clock. I think the things you mentioned are what all of us need to be focusing on going forward, because, we've routinely had disruptions throughout the course of time. You had 9/11, you had the recession. We've not had one on this magnitude from a pandemic in a while, but who's to say we don't have it again? So I think these are some good lessons learned moving forward on how we take care of our existing clients, because again, they're here, and we need to take care of them while we focus on those outside strategies. So, you know, I want to thank each of you for that have joined in on the call today. Especially thanks to Daniel and Will and Ken and Marianne and Vanessa for taking time out to prepare for this and to be a part of this. I think your answers, your experience have been very valuable to our audience. Gene, do you have any closing words that you would like to add?
There we go. Nothing from this standpoint. Again, thanks everybody for your participation. Like Will said, great information. We've got still have several questions that we've put together for the group. So what we might do is to put out a poll just to get some more input from those that are attending. This was one that I like. If y'all want to answer that real quick, I think it would be really good. Just from your organizational standpoint yourselves, from your organization's standpoint, are you anticipating any type of a budget shortfall for the year? If you want to take just a moment and answer that one, that would be a good one. I know we've talked a lot about, you know, what are we doing to help others? We didn't really get into that much about what we're looking at for our individual organizations, and what you're looking at is maybe meeting your needs for your organization as well. So we'll share all of that with everybody as well. So Will, that's all I have.
Well, thank you, Gene. Thank each one of you all. It looks like about 48% of you see at least a 20% reduction in your budget shortfall for this year. So it is kind of at a bad time, depending on your funding cycle. I know my organization's funding cycle is a July 1 beginning year. So it's going to be interesting. Obviously, my funding comes from the general fund, which is property taxes. I know every state has a different funding mechanism. I know several of your states, of our states, have sales tax. That's not going to be pretty. But you know, I think we need to continue to lean on each other and reach out and help one another. And Gene's and Matthew had put up another poll question. And if you have put together a local effort to create a loan fund for your small businesses. Okay, I was talking, and I was muted. So this is exciting that you all have done. The majority of you have put together some type of loan fund. You know, we're all professionals at this, but sometimes we're learning on the fly. And I think a lot of us had to do that during this, and we're not out of it yet. The good news is it appears that we're on the right side of it, but I think we still have to pay close attention. So thank you all for your time. Have a great rest of your day. And we hope to see you at some more of these type events as we begin to put them together. Thanks.